The American Iron and Steel Institute is extremely concerned about the high level of finished steel imports coming into the United States this year. Finished steel imports into the U.S. through the first 9 months of 2012 are running 19% ahead of last year. Even more serious is the fact that finished steel imports are taking 24% of U.S. steel market share, and this at a time when the domestic steel industry is running at only 70% capacity utilization. This import surge is largely a result of foreign government subsidies and other unfair trade practices driving irrational capacity expansion and the dumping of excess supply into the U.S. market. This results in great harm to U.S. steelmakers and could cost tens of thousands of high-value jobs through the steelmaking supply chain. The U.S. steel sector can compete against any steel industry in the world, but we can't compete against governments. As a result of these serious concerns, the American Iron and Steel Institute is urging our government to be proactive in its enforcement of the trade laws and to practice ever greater vigilance toward evidence of unfair foreign trade practices that can be injurious to American steel producers. This includes pressing our concerns with officials at the highest levels at both the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative. We also urge Congress and the administration to enact more effective trade policies to strengthen our anti-dumping and countervailing duty laws against unfair trade. We also urge them to strictly enforce all trade agreements and trade remedy orders and use all means to prevent and address unfair trade and injurious surges, including by addressing the unfair export subsidy Chinese goods enjoy because of Chinese government currency manipulation. AISI has been actively pressing Congress to pass 2 pieces of legislation to address these unfair trade practices that are harming the U.S. steel industry and American steel workers. First is a bill called the Enforce Act. This legislation will address the growing problem of fraudulent schemes by foreign producers to circumvent and evade U.S. anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders. It will create clear deadlines and procedures for U.S. Customs and Border Protection to investigate claims of evasion and to take action to collect the correct amount of duties imposed by law and due to the U.S. Treasury. This will ensure U.S. producers who have been injured by unfairly traded imports receive the remedy provided by law. The second is legislation to address Chinese currency manipulation. We are urging the Congress to pass the Currency Reform for Fair Trade Act, which would give U.S. manufacturers the ability to use the existing countervailing duty law to obtain a remedy for injury caused by goods benefiting from a currency manipulation export subsidy. We can no longer afford to turn a blind eye as other nations undercut us through unfair trade practices. Passing these 2 pieces of legislation would go a long way toward leveling the playing field for American manufacturers by combating unfair foreign trade practices and preserving and strengthening our nation's manufacturing base.